Graham. We can speak now to the author of that very report. Professor Richard McLaren joins me live now from Toronto. Professor McLaren, welcome to RT International. You are the man to talk to on this. And the first question I want to ask, because it's something that quite a few people have said about your report, some questions over whether you actually contacted the Russia sports ministry to get their side of the story. Did you make contact with them?
I did not make contact with them, nor did they come forward to offer anything to me.
Well, just off the back of that, did you not feel it was important to hear what they had to say in explanation?
Well, I was also on the independent commission, and I did have interviews in connection with that work, and we found that was not very helpful. And so I made a decision that with 57 days to do my work, I didn't have the time, and they didn't seem to have the interest, so I didn't do that.
Sorry to sort of bang this drum, but I would have thought that you're a lawyer. Isn't that a fairly basic legal principle to give anybody who's accused of something a chance to defend themselves?
Look at the camera, please.
It is in normal circumstances, yes, but I also had the evidence that was quite conclusive about what was going on, so I didn't need to have an explanation from somebody else about which would amount to a denial of what was going on.
Let's move on to the evidence you're talking about from Grigory Rodchenkov, who was head of the Russian anti-doping laboratory. Now, by his own admission, he was part of the problem. He was involved with administering the doping substances to the athletes. Did you treat the evidence he gave with any suspicion?
I don't think he was administering doping substances to the athletes, but he was preparing the cocktail which others administered to the athletes. But he was part of the system in other respects. And I don't rely just on his evidence. I rely on the forensic and laboratory analysis evidence to confirm what he says. So when he said that the samples were swapped, I conducted an experiment to see if tops could be removed, concluded that that was a possibility. When we examined the contents of urine samples we had from Sochi, there was salt in them which was in excess of what a normal human being would excrete in their urine. We also have confirmations from DNA and some samples having the urine sample having two different DNAs, which is a complete impossibility. It's obviously a mixing of samples of different people. So all of that scientific and laboratory analytical work confirmed and made me feel more confident in the information that was being provided. And so that's why I relied on what was being said. I didn't just rely on what he told me. I actually corroborated what he had to say by other techniques.
Now, the evidence in your report, it is very damning. It'll be of great concern to anybody who loves sport. You say that Russia worked out how to open these tamper-proof bottles that contain the urine samples. You've said that you were shown how to open, how one is opened. Do you worry now that it isn't just Russia and other countries could be doing this as well?
Certainly a possibility. The important point to make here is that while the bottles are tamper evident, they are capable of being intervened with. We conducted an experiment that confirmed that, but in doing that we left scratch marks on the inside of the caps, and the bottles that came from Sochi had similar types of scratch marks on them. So we weren't able to, in the experiment, do anything without leaving the similar kind of evidence that there was tampering that we discovered from the Sochi bottles. From that, plus all the other information, you have to conclude that the bottle caps were opened, were removed. Subsequently, replaced after the urine had been changed.
In the name of transparency, is it possible you could explain to us what this technique you were shown was for opening the containers?
No, I've elected not to do that. All I'll say is that it was developed as an experiment by my experts, and they performed it to my satisfaction personally in front of me, so I know that it can be done. I'm not interested in putting out in the public domain the technique itself.
Well, I asked just because you say that there's evidence left behind, so it wouldn't be a concern. The people responsible for checking the samples would still be able to see any evidence of them being opened, so I don't see the damage there. But OK, you don't want to. I'd just like to ask you next about the government connection, because this has been called state-sponsored doping in Russia. In state-sponsored doping in Russia, what's your evidence of the government connection?
The evidence of government connections comes from the electronic data, the revived electronic files that were deleted, and other similar sources, and demonstrates with email communications, other types of communications, how the system worked right up to the Deputy Minister of Sport,
who, as I understand, has actually been suspended now by the Russian sports minister. That was a news wire that we were just getting. In terms of this whole investigation, it arose from a documentary that was produced by a German TV channel. They've also made similar accusations against Kenyan athletes, and that there's a similar kind of process going on in Kenya. Are you aware of, have you been asked to be involved in any investigation into other countries, for example, Kenya?
I have not been involved in an investigation for Kenya. I was aware that those allegations exist, but it's not something that I was involved in. I only know what's in the public press about what's going on in Kenya.
Okay, another, I would say, concern for certainly some athletes who've always been clean in Russia is about the fact that they will also likely, it seems, be banned from the Olympics. What was your remit when it came to the clean athletes? Were you asked to ascertain the percentage of athletes, samples that had been doped and those that hadn't? How many clean athletes, how many dirty athletes are there, in your opinion?
That question cannot be answered, because the problem is that samples that were dirty, the records were reported as clean in both the WADA system and in the laboratory system. So that means that all the negatives that are reported, you can't be sure whether they were involved in the falsifying of records or whether they're truly negative samples. There's very little way of ever determining all of that.
What is your opinion on WADA's recommendation?
In other words, a negative doesn't mean it's negative.
Yeah, so there's kind of no kind of clear, definitive answer on who's doped and who hasn't. What do you think of WADA's recommendation that all Russian athletes and Paralympic athletes should not be able to participate in Rio?
I'm not aware that WADA has made that recommendation. May have been happening while I've been busy with interviews. I haven't read anything about what WADA's reaction is.
And just one final comment about the government connection that you mentioned, some emails. Have you in this report named all the names? Have you got the proof to back all of this up so that everyone knows the exact chain of evidence and who's implicated?
Yes, we do. We have all of that evidence locked up. Some of it has been provided by way of confidential arrangements. So we haven't published it, but we certainly have it. And we're not going to publish it because of the need to protect the sources that provided the information and their concerns about what might happen to family members.
I can understand that, of course. Is there not a concern, though, that if you want to clean up this problem that you say exists, that you have to get rid of the people who are responsible for it at the very top? So don't you need to publish the names?
Well, it doesn't mean you have to publish the names, but to the appropriate authorities, you could provide the evidence, and then they can make the decision as to what they want to do. And if they decide that there should be taking some action, then they could publish the names. It doesn't mean I have to publish the names.
Okay, and in terms of the burden of proof, are you confident about the accuracy of the report that you've come up with? Do you feel that you looked under every possible stone and went down every possible avenue of investigation?
I did not say that I've looked under every stone and looked down every avenue of possible investigation. I had 57 days to do this work. I did as much investigation work as I could. Then I had to draw a line and say that's the end of the investigation for now and write the report. We are confident that everything that we say in the report meets a standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, and therefore we were prepared to publish it. Anything that didn't meet that standard was not published. But I wouldn't say that I've looked for every possible source. It's impossible to have done so in 57 days, and I'd be misleading people if I said I had.
Are you unhappy about the amount of time you were given? For accuracy's sake, would you have liked more time?
I think anybody who conducts an investigation would always like more time than they have. And you have to be practical about the time frame. The time frame was forced because of the upcoming Rio Games. And so am I unhappy? No, I'm not unhappy. I took the assignment on knowing the time frame. I'm just saying that it very much limited the extent of the work that could have been done had we had much longer time frame to do it.
And finally, Professor, on a personal level, you're a sports lawyer. You've been around these kind of allegations, I'm sure, in the past. How shocking was this for you to uncover the evidence that you say you came across?
Well, when I first read the article in the New York Times, I didn't think that it was possible to do what was being said, and I was highly skeptical, and I was expecting in the course of, once I was appointed to do the investigation, that we maybe wouldn't be able to confirm what was going on. That proved to not be the case. I was able to confirm everything that's in that article. And in the course of doing that work, I then discovered what was going on a daily basis in the Moscow laboratory, and that's what surprised me.